Hey everybody, Winn Claybaugh here, and welcome to another amazing issue of Masters with Winn Claybaugh. 30 years now that I've been doing this, and it just gets better and better. And today is a good example of how it's getting better because I'm sitting with an incredible guy who I know many of you already know who he is, but of course I've got to give a proper introduction here. Uh, and I'm going to read this. So Mike, I'm not sure who wrote this, but it sounds good. From the
Oh, good. It's probably me.
Baltimore Opera to QVC Shopping Channel, executive producer, host, best-selling author Mike Rowe has had hundreds of jobs. You know, when I read that, I was like, Mike, you couldn't keep a job? Hundreds of jobs?
Maybe more.
Okay. Relish his role as a chronic freelancer. He's best known, and this is what we know him as the dirtiest man on TV, a title he earned on the hit TV show Dirty Jobs. He has narrated hundreds of documentaries about space, nature, dinosaurs, and how stuff works. Most recently, Mike is in search of remarkable people making a difference in their communities on Facebook's groundbreaking series, Returning the Favor. You can also watch Mike on the TV series Somebody's Got to Do It, or listen to him on The Way I Heard It, America's #1 short form podcast of 5-minute mysteries for the curious mind and a short attention span. You were thinking of me in that. His book, The Way I Heard It, is a companion to his podcast. In addition, Mike is the CEO of MicroWorks Foundation, a 501c3 public charity that debunks myths and misperceptions about the trades and helps close the skills gap. And of course, we're going to talk a lot about that. The foundation has granted or helped facilitate the granting of more than $5 million in technical and vocational education, including work ethic scholarships. And just straight up, Mike, I have to thank you because several of my Paul Mitchell schools have been recipients. They've had students in their schools who have been recipients of scholarships from MicroWorks Foundation. So thank you for that. That's pretty incredible
Well,
what you're doing out there.
that's my pleasure. And look, things happen fast. Things are changing fast. We just got to $20 million in
Wow,
scholarships
20
this
million.
year. Yep, and I think we'll double it next year. Um, Things are shifting in the employment space faster than I've ever seen it happen, and people are looking at the cost of a 4-year degree, and they're looking at all the other ways you can make an honest buck by mastering a skill that's in demand, and they're making different choices. And cosmetology has been at the forefront of that, really, if you think about it, for a long, long time. So it's a privilege to help you guys out.
Well, thank you. And obviously you have a lot to do with shifting that perception and the direction of all of that, which again is all very, very good news. You know, we talk about your role, Discovery Channel's show, Dirty Jobs. My only experience with doing a dirty job, so to speak, was I was paid to scoop up lion dung from a big barrel to put into little tiny containers, which was sold as like this animal deterrent to repel cats and deer and rabbit and foxes by mimicking the
Sure.
scent of a predator. That's the only dirty job I ever had. So,
Well, it's a good one. And lion dung is notable because the lion's diet is so rooted in protein. So it's thick, it's heavy, there's a lot of water in it. And as you may recall, it's got a real funk to it, Win. I wish I had it around here after the first season of Dirty Jobs ended. I was on the cover of TV Guide, and the headline under my face said, Mike Rowe brings you feces from every species. And that's what the first season was. It was just me
right,
picking up crap from all creatures great and small, including
right.
our own species, by the way.
You know, one of the things that you mentioned in listening to your podcast, your TED Talk, some of your shows, something that you brought up that I found was fascinating, not surprising, but fascinating. That in working with these people, you were kind of working as an apprentice with them, so to speak. What people would think or consider to be a horrible job, you were commenting like these are the happiest people that I've ever met.
Well, it was a long road for me. I was a chronic freelancer, as my bio indicated, for many, many years. And in that capacity, I did a pretty good impersonation of a host. I could hit a mark, I could say my line, I could interview people, I could create the illusion of knowledge and competence in short bursts. Um, Dirty Jobs was an entirely different proposition, one that I kind of Forrest Gumped my way into. But to your point, the end of the book that I wrote lands on a realization. And the realization for me was that I was a better guest than I was a host. I
Hmm.
was I was better as an avatar, or a cipher, or an apprentice. Because as an apprentice, if it's your first day on the job, nobody expects you to be great. What they expect you to do is show up and try.
Hmm.
And that was the secret sauce in Dirty Jobs. Once I realized that I could occupy a host role, but embrace the identity of an apprentice, then that meant the person I was there profiling could be the expert.
Hmm.
And that meant I could learn from them on camera. And the thing that I eventually realized that really kept that that dynamic on its feet was that regular people, when the camera can mess you up. It's a weird set of muscles, and when production comes in, with their lights and with their second takes and with their directors and their clipboards and their stopwatches, it freaks people out. We didn't do any of that on Dirty Jobs. We
Hmm.
never did a second take. So all we really tried to do was create an environment where the people could be themselves, where I could learn from them and try my best to do their job and have a few laughs along the way. And if you earn somebody's trust early in the day when you're filming a show like this, and you can get them to really become themselves and to ignore all the all, all the production. Production oftentimes is the enemy of authenticity.
Right.
And I wanted Dirty Jobs to be authentic, and I wanted the hero of each episode to be the person we were profiling. And the only way you can do that is to make yourself if there's a joke, it's on you. You know, you have to be willing. That show required a lot, but n nothing more so than humility. And, I was 42 when I finally got that show on the air, and I was not humble. I had been used to being in the spotlight and used to having all the information at my disposal, and used to being the source of credible information. I had to let all that go.
Hmm.
And it took a while, but if picking up species from every species doesn't make you humble, nothing will.
So you did hundreds of these, correct, over the years?
Yeah, 350.
Wow. So I'm thinking that the experience for you was more about what you learned about people and not just the jobs. So what kind of perhaps surprised you most about the people who do these jobs?
That's very insightful of you, actually. Most people don't get there, because the show had such a spectacular element to it visually. It really, people typically ask me, "Oh, what was the dirtiest job, and what was the most dangerous job?" Because we did a lot of those. And when were you the most terrified, and this, that, and the other. And I've got good answers for all those questions. But the truth is, when the show really, really took hold, it's when we realized that it wasn't really about the dirt or the job. It was about the person. Dirty Jobs was a talk show in a sewer. And,
Mhm.
you know, earlier we were talking about the business of not following your passion,
Mhm.
right? But bringing it with you. That was one of hundreds of lessons that I learned just from working with regular people who were very connected. You know, they were very connected to what I would call the fundamentals, like where our food comes from, where our energy comes from, who we are as a country. Those kinds of things seemed, and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but most of the people we profiled on that show, they really knew who they were, and they really knew what mattered to them, and they were grounded, and they were rooted, you
Hmm.
know. And so if you if you let people like that do the talking, and if you ask them honest questions, yeah, you'll learn. You'll learn more than you can write down or recall.
Yeah, because yeah, we were talking about passion earlier, and two of my favorite words that are words that a lot of people dislike. One is hustle. I love that word, and a lot of people think that that word has some negative connotation, that it means that you'll screw people over to get what you want, and I don't think that it means that at all. It just means that for a lot of people starting out, you have youth on your side. You need to hustle. It's going to require lots and lots of dedication and work. And the other word that I love that people don't like is discipline. And some of the examples that you were giving were you gave these examples of people who are very, very successful at what they were doing, and you preface it like, do you think that this was their passion to choose this as a job? They were hustling, they were providing for their family, they were doing what they needed to do, and it just turned into something that was absolutely financially successful for them.
They were also taking an inventory of sorts of themselves. How am I doing? How am I feeling? How's the road I'm on? Is it still taking me to a place where I thought I wanted to be? I remember a guy in Wisconsin. His name was Les Swanson. Les Swanson from Wisconsin. He was a septic tank cleaner,
Okay.
and he was in his mid 50s when I met him, just 20 years ago, maybe his early 50s. And he took me to a little slice of hell called a pumping station. You've seen them. If you haven't been in them, they're these like nondescript bunkers on the side of the road. You don't They don't look like anything, and most people wouldn't look at them twice. But inside, it's a portal, and below, about 25, 30 feet, uh, it's a pumping station where raw sewage accumulates,
Okay.
right, on its way to the wastewater treatment plant. So I'm outside of Madison. It's about 100 degrees, and Les Swanson takes me to a pumping station. He's got he owns two or three of these honey wagons, right, and they suck the crap out of these stations every day, among other things. And this one was clogged. So we went in and we were wearing sort of rubber suits and standing in the filth
Oh my.
up to our waist, knocking cholesterol off of the wall. Now, it's not just hot, it's humid, it's unspeakable. It's just so bad that we're laughing. My cameraman's laughing, I'm laughing, and as we're working, and at some point, I turn to Les on camera, and I say, "Hey, man, what happened to you?" He said, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, you're 52 years old. You're standing here up to your nipples in a river of crap, knocking cholesterol off the wall." And he was whistling, as he was literally whistling while he was working. You seem very happy. And I said, "So what brought you here?" And he said, "Well, it's a crooked road, right?" And I said, "Yeah, but I'd be like, what were you doing before this?" He said, "Oh, well, I spent 15 years as a high school guidance counselor. And then I spent 9 years with my own practice." He was a psychiatrist.
Wow.
And right, and now here he is 52 years old doing what he's doing. And I said, "So what was the inciting incident? What I still don't understand why you would leave the air-conditioned environment of really higher education." And without missing a beat, he just looked at me and said, "I got tired of dealing with other people's shit." Now, when a grown man covered with other people's shit tells you he got tired of dealing with other people's shit. Like that lands. It's not only good TV, it's like a really honest moment. And
Right.
we had a good laugh, and then we finished doing our job, and then we went back to Les's house and cleaned up and sat by his beautiful pool next
Mm.
to a margarita machine and had a couple of cocktails and talked about all the trouble in the world.
Wow.
Here's a guy, I mean, talk about not following your passion. That guy didn't grow up thinking he wanted to be in a pumping station cleaning it out. It's the last thing in the world he wanted to do. He followed his passion. His passion put him on a road. And 20 years down that road, he thought, no, man, it's just, I'm tired. I want to do something else.
Mm.
So he goes where nobody else is going. Now he owns 3 honey wagons, has a dozen employees. He's making a wonderful living. Is it difficult? Yeah. Is it disgusting? Sure. Does he care? No. No, he does not. He
Wow.
knows that what he's doing is meaningful and that if he and his crew call out sick for a week or two, Madison's got a real problem. It's meaningful work, it's
Wow.
lucrative. So I got 350 stories like that. And, when you add them up and you look at them in their totality, it does change you.
Mm.
It does force you to wonder maybe, maybe if you're on the wrong road, is there time to change? What are you doing and why and so forth? Dirty Jobs was a romp, but it also became a pretty interesting rumination on the philosophy of living and making an honest buck.
And I love the message of the show because that's what it did. Perhaps it gave people insight into what other people do, what other people put up with, or what our people are passionate about. Gives people a healthier perspective on, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit more disciplined. Maybe I need to take a different turn here. Yeah, yeah, not to switch gears away from the beautiful story you just told, but was there a job that you secretly enjoyed the most?
Oh man. Well, I had
I'm guessing
so
that was
much
not one of
fun.
them, but
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to separate the fun of the job from the thrill. I mean, the actual thrill of making a show that never should have been made by network standards, that never would have been greenlit today. The fact that we kind of snuck this new format onto the air back in 2003, that was immensely satisfying to me. The
mm,
fact that we were able to film, I mean, this is one of the first reality shows before reality was even a category. You know, when I said there were no second takes, I should probably accentuate just how insane that is for a brand, right? I mean, this is the Discovery Channel. They're the channel of David Attenborough and Jacques Cousteau and Jane
mm,
Goodall and experts and I'm like a very careful, beautiful brand. Um, I was out there saying, no, we're not going to fake anything, and we'll shoot the show in a fairly traditional way with 3 cameras covering the action, but there's going to be a fourth camera. I called it the truth cam. It was really just a behind the scenes camera, and it never stopped rolling.
okay,
So I was able to take footage from that camera, not a ton of it, but some, and cut it into every finished piece. So what the viewer saw, Win, was not just me and Wes, going into the the pumping station and doing the work. All that stuff was shot in a fairly straightforward way. But his offhand comment, "Oh, I got tired of dealing with other people's shit," that was captured by the behind the scenes camera. And so when you cut those moments into the show, what you show the viewer is that you're not there to lie to them. You're there to show them what you saw on that day. And that for me, I mean, after doing 20 years of TV that was careful and deliberate and intentional and heavily edited and so forth, this was a revelation.
Mhm.
This that became my passion. And so when you say which one did I have fun doing? Well, I mean, I had fun puking my guts out on a crab boat in the Bering Sea. I was miserable, but I also knew I was I was in an environment that most of the audience had never seen before,
Mhm.
and I was excited to be able to do that. I didn't have a particularly good time cleaning skulls in Oklahoma City at Skulls Unlimited, but I was thrilled to do it because it had never occurred to me how how skeletons were prepared for display in museums,
Mhm.
and how skulls were prepared for display in teaching hospitals and universities and so forth. So for me, because I had a pretty healthy sense of curiosity and the freedom to create a show in any way I wanted, I was just a kid in a candy store.
Mhm.
So even in the most challenging, difficult, painful, dangerous shoots, we always had fun.
Mhm.
The crew and I were very close, and we were all sort of in on the joke. It's just TV, but we knew we were doing something that was different. And then we started winning awards for it. And
Mhm.
then Dirty Jobs launched 38 other shows, all based on people and jobs that we had profiled in the course of the
Wow.
first few seasons. You just never know. You just never know. That's why, back to the passion thing. If somebody had said, "Oh, you know, eh, I wound up doing exactly what I wanted to do, but I had no idea that such a thing might exist." In the same way that most people who drive by a pumping station have no idea what's down there.
Right.
You gotta go look. You gotta kick the tires.
So why do you say that a show like that wouldn't be accepted today? Wouldn't get a green light today?
Um, well, a couple things. The the industry in general is undergoing a level of turmoil that I've never seen before. The consolidation with streamers, the just the way everything has become compressed financially. Um, it, it's kind of boring, but it's important because most production companies are out of business. That most successful production companies that were making TV 5, 10 years ago, certainly, but even a couple years ago, they're gone. The the shows, there's still an appetite for them, but the budgets are 40% of what they used to be. So
Right.
on a financial level, it's just not tenable. But mostly it 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 takes a lot of courage for an executive to greenlight a show that doesn't do second takes and that makes heroes out of people who have never been on TV before. It takes real courage to greenlight a concept that doesn't have a script or doesn't rely on too much pre-production. It requires an extraordinary amount of trust from an executive to let a smartass like me crawl through a sewer and make it up as he goes.
Got it.
Um, so the concept would have never been greenlit because it was disgusting, but the format and the approach would have never been greenlit because it was uncontrollable. The only way this worked, I shot the pilot on my own. I I I basically wrote a book without a book deal and then took it to a publisher and said,
Mm.
"Here, if you like it, right? Put it out." That's what I did with the show. And I said, "Here, if you like it, put it on." They didn't like it. They didn't want it. They thought it was puerile and kind of disgusting. But
Mm.
they liked me, so they agreed to put the pilot on the air. And then they sent me to Egypt to host some tomb raiding special. Well, when I came back, the pilot had generated thousands of letters. And here, you'll love this part. The letters weren't from people saying, "That was disgusting. How dare you, Discovery?" Or, "My God, that was funny. Mike's so charming. More of that, please." it was neither of those. The letters were from regular people saying, "You think that was dirty? Wait do you see what my dad does.
Oh,
My
wow.
cousin, my brother, my sister, my mom, my dad. Wait do you see what they do." And that's when it happened. That's when we knew, good grief, there's a hunger to celebrate work
Hmm.
in this country, and nobody has really done that justice
God, I love that.
on TV
I
before.
I love that. You know, the dignity of work, which actually kind of takes me to this next topic here, you know, blue collar pride, so to speak, and the idea of undervaluing skilled trades compared to white collar careers. So, you know, when people hear trade school, maybe I'm really switching gears here. When people hear trade school, what do you think that they still misunderstand the most about that?
Yeah, this is the place where we send the kids who didn't have what it takes to go to college. This is where we send the troubled kid, the ADD kid,
Right.
the backward kid. This is the vocational consolation prize we've set aside for those of you who don't have what it takes to get a 4-year degree and thrive in the real world.
Hmm.
Those those stigmas and those stereotypes have been with us for nearly 50 years, ever since we took shop class out of high school. In my view, um, that's when we really put our thumb on the scale and started to magnify and elevate one form of education, the 4-year degree, at the expense of all the others.
Right.
And when that happened, you know, a lot of unintended consequences followed. We painted with a very broad brush, and we told kids that they would be screwed if they didn't get the 4-year degree. And then we opened up a vast pile, a bottomless pit of free money, and encouraged kids to borrow that money to get that degree. And so the giant push for a university experience came at the expense of all of these other quite necessary jobs. And so today, it's $1.8 trillion dollars in student loans currently on the books. Most of that money is held by people who got a 4-year degree and who are not even working in their chosen field. We have 7 million open positions today that don't require a 4-year degree, but require training, like the type your schools provide,
Mhm.
like the type, I mean, we've got, good grief, 500,000 open roles right now for electricians. Shipbuilders are about the same,
Oh,
welders,
wow.
plumbers. You can go down the list. So the skills gap is a very real thing. And we're starting to get the memo. AI has changed the whole conversation. Um, but in general, I think people are starting to realize, you know, AI is not going to cut your hair. It's not going to snake your pipe. It's not going to it's not going to build your patio. It's, you know, for so long we were told, oh, these blue collar jobs, they're kind of doomed. You know, the robots are coming. Well, the robots are coming, and AI is here, but they're not coming for the welders or the electricians or
Right.
the hairdressers. They're coming for the coders. They're coming for the programmers. So it's a very interesting time to be running a foundation like the one I run, and I'm so lucky to have had 20 years. That Dirty Jobs has been on the air for 22 years, when and so that's given me a level of permission, really, to mouth off in a lot of different ways and to answer questions like the one you just asked. I'll be at Congress next week. I'll be in the Pentagon. I'm talking, you know, to elected officials and a lot of people in C suites today about this very thing: how to reinvigorate the trades and what is the definition of a good job and how are we going to equip the next generation with a useful skill. Uh, Talk about following your passion. There's no, the way I grew up, eh, the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing today is impossible.
Right.
It feels impossible.
See, I just love that you have that dirty jobs background because it did make you the spokesmodel, so to speak. I said spokesmodel, didn't I? Spokes
You did.
spokesperson
Well, when
for this
I'm just as
topic, which
God
is
made me.
important, right?
I if you see me as a model, so be it.
We all do. We all do, Mike. Talking about that 4-year college experience, oftentimes the guidance counselor rarely mentions the trades. People often view the trades as, like you said, something that you pursue only if you fail the SATs, or rarely do they say you can learn to fix an air conditioner or become a hairdresser making six figures before your friends finish intro to what the F am I doing with my life 101. We joke around here. I live in Newport Beach, California, that Newport is filled with, millions of realtors who all graduated from USC, and now they're realtors in Newport Beach.
Yeah.
They push college as though that's the only golden ticket. So, what do you
Well,
think hands-on careers or still framed as backup plans instead of first choice opportunities?
well, in general, all virtually any career that doesn't require a 4-year degree is still looked at by a lot of Americans as subordinate or some kind of consolation prize in the wide world of work. It's very, very hard to debunk stigmas and stereotypes and myths and misperceptions that are that widely held. It takes time, um, it takes headlines, it takes proof. But all those things are happening, and a lot of those real estate agents down there in Newport Beach, they're starting to get the memo. I'm sure you know a few. Um, because if you're going to sell a house, that means somebody had to build the house. And if you're going to build the house, that means you're either going to be on time and under budget, or you're not. Well, spoiler alert, nobody is. Nobody's on time. Nobody's under budget. Real estate and new home construction and commercial construction right now are in the grip of an existential labor crisis. The people simply aren't there to do the work, and that will trickle up and that will impact those real estate agents with 4-year degrees from Southern Cal. And it's happening everywhere. Not a week goes by where somebody doesn't call me. Normally, when I'm sitting right at this desk, some leader of some industry who's in a panic because they simply can't find the workers they need. The maritime industrial base, the guys who build our submarines, right? They've got a 10-year contract for the Navy. They need to deliver 3 nuclear powered subs every year for 10 years. They said, "We're having a hell of a time finding tradespeople." And "Can you help?" I said, "Maybe. How many do you need?" 400,000.
Jeez,
It's
wow,
400,000 win.
wow.
Now, granted, that's over a 5-year period, but they need 100,000 right now. "Where are they?" they ask. "Do you know?" And I said, "Well, actually, yeah, man, I know where they are. They're in the 8th grade. You've got You've got to get them now. You've got to start." And you mentioned the guidance counselors. Look, it's true, but it's worse than what you said. It's not just that they're ignoring or historically have ignored a long list of really viable careers. Many counselors today are still bonused on their ability to get their kids, the students, into a 4-year school. Their comp is tied to their ability to get more kids matriculated in that direction. So from an incentive standpoint, we've been upside down for a long time. I just talked to Jim Farley over at Ford. Uh, he has 5,000 open positions, 5,000 open bays right now.
Wow.
It's not because cars and trucks don't need to be fixed. He these are six-figure mechanic jobs that he can't fill. The energy industry is off the charts. The data centers that are being built, they need hundreds of thousands of electricians and plumbers. They can't find them. So this thing, for me, MicroWorks just started as a modest PR campaign to help connect kids who wanted to pursue these skills with the companies who were willing to pay to train them. Today, it it's more of a national security issue. It
Well,
The stakes are that high. Now, what's so interesting about you and what you do is that you're kind of one but not the other. With respect, I would say that the country is not facing an existential crisis because of bad haircuts. But I will say
are you
that
laughing
your
at me
industry,
while you're saying that? Is that am
on
I the
account of
butt
the
of that
glare,
joke right there?
I can't even look at you, Win, because of the glare. Good
Oh,
grief, that
great.
light
Thank
on the
you.
top of your head,
Thank
killing me.
you.
No, it's look, two things can be true at the same time. Your industry is not fundamentally tied to national defense,
Right.
but if you think about the hundreds of thousands of people who prosper as a result of the skill that your schools impart, well, if those people suddenly didn't have that skill, if they were suddenly unemployed, if they were suddenly unable to provide for their families, well, then you would have a national security issue. So, you know, everything to me redounds to the dignity of work, the willingness to master a skill that's in demand, uh, work ethic, attitude. Those things are still very much for sale. And I know you talk about that a lot, and you probably get a lot of grief for it because nobody wants a lecture.
Right.
Nobody wants a sermon. Nobody wants some wealthy middle-aged guy like us to shake their finger and say, not that way, this way, right? So, you know, it's a it's a hard needle to thread because the truth is oftentimes not the thing you want to hear. And there's a lot of pressure coming from a lot of big institutions that would prefer to keep kids on the hamster wheel that led to that $1.8 trillion in student loans. So if you want to push back, you've got to be willing to break a few eggs and be a jagged little pill, which I'm good with. And I get the impression you're okay with as well.
I'm okay with it. And because you threw the pendulum to the professional beauty industry, which I'm very, very grateful for, obviously for maybe selfish reasons. Uh, I want to ask you about cosmetology, and you were talking about that skill gap. 89,000 salon positions went unfilled last year, and over 80%, it's upwards of 87 and 90% of people in the professional beauty industry are female, are women. Oftentimes they're the breadwinners in their homes. Oftentimes they are single moms, or they're moms that require the flexibility that the professional beauty industry can provide. And so obviously I think it's an incredible industry for people to consider and to choose. And I have to tell you a really quick story. A good friend of mine, Jordan Toma, who's great guy, and he goes into high schools, and his tells his own personal story of having every label from ADHD to uh, severe anxiety, and just struggled through school. So he was always in what they called the resource room. The resource room where you're in trouble, or you don't have good grades, or that's for whatever, you're in a separate room. And he said that everybody, so he went to his high school reunion, and everybody at the high school reunion that was also in the resource room along with him are now very, very successful hairdressers and salon owners. So I just
Look,
love hearing that story.
well, I- some it to me it really comes back to passion and opportunity. Which are you truly going to follow? And you would know better than I, but I'd wager uh, an awful lot of people who are doing very well in your industry didn't dream of cutting hair for a living. They got there, and maybe they got there because they had a kid and another kid, and they needed a part-time job. So they learned a skill and they started doing this thing in their spare time. And then maybe the tail wagged the dog, and maybe they became Les Swanson, and all of a sudden, right, they're doing a new thing. I mean, I'm such a fan of what you guys have built. And, to be honest, uh and I know we talked about this when you came on my pod, but it it's worth repeating because I was wrong. I was I had a very clear view of the jobs that I wanted to celebrate in my foundation. And it was welders and steam fitters and pipe fitters and mechanics. It was HVAC technicians, electricians. It was the muscular trades.
Right.
And it was where was I was in North Carolina in like 2022, I guess, and I needed a haircut. And I was filming something. I had an appearance that night, whatever it was, and I just looked up. Actually, I looked up and saw my reflection in a big plate glass window, and that's what made me go, "Oh, dude, you need a haircut." And then a second later, I realized that window was attached to a salon called Cut. So I just walked right in, and I met this young this young hairdresser, sassy as could be. She knew me. She and her dad used to watch Dirty Jobs, and I sat down and she cut my hair. And in the course of it, obviously we had a conversation. That's another great thing about your industry. Other than bartenders, I mean, who who hears more stories than hairdressers?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's
Well,
what you never
I
see
told
on your hairdresser. You're loyal to your hairdresser because they know too much.
yeah. Well, I told her some things and she told me some things. And what she told me was she was working at another salon in Raleigh or wherever I was. And so she had two jobs. And then her family had a restaurant and the hostess had quit. So she was being a hostess there as well. Here's this 29-year-old woman with three jobs, working her butt off, funny, sassy, and she knows who I am. And toward the end of the cut, she says, "So how come your program doesn't offer scholarships to people like me? I've got work ethic. I've
Mm.
got dreams." And I had no good answer. I just sat there and said, uh, all I could say was, in a smart alecky way, is because our national defense is not crumbling as a result of a bad haircut. And she said, "Yeah, but my whole life is the result of a good one." So I went back and I talked to my partner and I said, "Look, there's no reason our scholarship program can't include stipends and grants for aspiring cosmetologists."
Mm.
And last year, you your industry was the second or third most engaged with my scholarship program. Word went out and we funded, I think, close to $2 million in scholarships for the cosmetology industry. And I was happy to do it. And I'm not saying any of this to pat myself on the back. Quite the opposite. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it,
Mm.
but for a completely random encounter
Well,
with the sassy hairdresser.
maybe I had something to do with getting the word out about that. So you can
Maybe you
blame me,
did.
but thanks for that because I'm actually on the board for an organization, a nonprofit organization called Beauty Changes Lives, and the mission is to make careers in beauty and wellness a first choice, and we provide educational scholarships and mentorship opportunities, and so to know that there are again people like you with an incredible voice, a wonderful platform, and you're doing good things really means a lot. I
Well,
want to
thanks.
ask you, what needs to change if you were to perhaps provide some advice for students or parents or career counselors for educators. If you were to redesign high school education, what would you add immediately? What would you change?
Mm. Well, let me think about the high school beat for a minute and say that beyond that, the thing that I would think real hard about is our relationship with credentialing and licensure. And this is probably potentially inconvenient, right? I mean, you run schools, and so I'm not sure exactly how your network works or when it's determined that a person has mastered the skill that's necessary. Um, States, as I understand it, have different levels of licensure and different requirements, and this is true in so many different industries.
Mhm.
Um, so maybe you can educate me on the whys and the wherefores in cosmetology, but I'll tell you in plumbing, It takes 8 years to become a master plumber.
Wow.
About like why? I mean, it's not thoracic surgery, it's why can't a plumber start working as a licensed plumber when they ace their test and when they prove beyond a shadow of a doubt through a lens of meritocracy that they've mastered the skill, they're ready to work. With some of these more muscular trades, I think we're really going to have to dramatically change the way we think about qualifications, because that that electrician that data center is desperate to have right now is in the 8th grade. So what can we do to get he or she fast tracked? That's the first question. Whether it's the 8th grade or high school or post secondary, are we on a fast track, or are we simply going through the motions of, well, this is how much time it takes? And look, I feel pretty strongly about it because I saw it firsthand. I was in Oklahoma last year at a terrific technical college called Central Tech. And I was there for oil and gas. I was there. We were profiling some guys going through a welding and pipe fitting program. But down the hall was a nursing program. And during
Mm.
my lunch break, I went down there to chat with the nurses because, why wouldn't I? And it was amazing. Like 8 or 9 of them and their instructors were all there. And I asked the instructor, I said, so this is a 2-year program? And they all kind of laughed. And one of them said, sometimes, Carol looks like she's going to be here 2 years and 2 months. Poor Carol. And then Susan, uh, she's going to finish up next month, and she'd been there less than a year. There had been people who had gone through in 7 months. There had been people who go through in 2 years
Mm.
because the nursing shortage in Oklahoma is so acute. They can't
Right.
wait. Right. So, I think that's part of a conversation that's going to need to happen. Um, but mostly, I think you hit on it earlier. It's what are our guidance counselors and teachers doing with respect to setting the table? What does the table of your future look like through the lens of vocational possibility? If Look, when we took the reason taking shop class out of high school was so jacked up isn't just because we denied a whole generation of kids a potential career in these trades. It's because we removed the optical proof of those careers to every kid. So, even if you had no interest in the skilled trades, you're just walking from math class to English class, you might go past a wood shop or a metal shop or an auto shop, and maybe you would look in and maybe you would see this whole world that you hadn't been exposed to that looks an awful lot like work, right? And maybe who knows what synapse fires as a result? Maybe none, but at least the jobs are there. The
Right.
problem today, Win, is you've got millions of kids who have finished high school and they have no idea that these jobs exist. They have no idea you can start. uh, We've we've helped 3,500 people through the MicroWorks Foundation. I'd say a third of them are welders. I'd say 80% of those welders are making north of 6 figures a year. Many are making a lot more than that.
Wow.
So, just the sheer evidence that demands a verdict and the success stories that live in your industry and all the industries that I would call them, dirty jobs industries, although many of them aren't dirty. They just require skill, and the fact that those stories don't get told,
Mm.
and the fact that those careers are not positioned as aspirational, that's where it starts, and that does need to change, and I think it will change. I just think sometimes things have to go splat
Mm.
before they get better. And that's hard to watch and difficult to see, but it's happening right now. And hopefully, what was it Winston Churchill said, when you're marching through hell,
Keep
keep
going.
marching. That's right.
Just talking about work in general, pride in work and work ethic and all of that. What do you wish more young people or people in general understood about work?
Well, it's not the enemy. And if you if you think about it in the way that we're taught to think about it, then what do you do when you're done working? I mean, what's the narrative? You retire, right? And why do we look forward to retirement so much? Well, we're taught to look forward to retirement because the table has been set in a way that would suggest that the reason we're not as happy as we could be is because we're doing something we don't want to do, something we're not passionate about. Or maybe, there's a very popular narrative that says we're being abused. We're caught up in this rigged system where my boss, that rapacious capitalist, is taking all the money and there's none for me and it's not fair and it's broke. And what's the point? Like all of these things. I'm not saying that there aren't many examples of abuses. I'm not saying the world is fair. But I am saying that with regard to work, the way forward, there is a measure of personal responsibility in it. And I know nobody wants a lecture. I know nobody wants to hear this, but it's the truth. It's the cold, hard truth that Les Swanson from Wisconsin, making a very nice living, was covered in crap and sweating and happy. All of
Mm,
these things, when are true at the same time. And I guess I would say, you know, maybe I'd do it different if I had to do it over again. But of the many people we featured on Dirty Jobs, I know for a fact that at least 40 were multimillionaires.
okay.
We we never made that point because the show wasn't meant to be a polemic. And also because, I typically didn't feature the boss. Oftentimes I did because they were entrepreneurs and they had a small business. But either way, nobody that we featured on that show was consistent with the image most of us have in our mind of a successful, prosperous person.
Mhm,
They were covered with mud and grime and slime
mhm,
and shit and worse things, you know. And so the the idea of success, the cognitive dissonance that came out of Dirty Jobs was huge. And maybe if I were to do it again, I would make a point to say, look, this guy is prospering. He right? He's prospering. I didn't want to do that because I wanted the viewer to come to their own conclusion. But we are in a different time today. And today, I think it's really incumbent on the people who are in charge of the industries that we're talking about to make a more persuasive case for the success stories that live in their own lane. And I know you do that. You have your conventions, you have your rock stars, you celebrate them. But to do it outside of your own industry. That's the trick,
mhm.
right? Anybody can preach to the choir. Anybody can get an amen on a Sunday morning from the pulpit. What do you do on a Tuesday afternoon when you're out
Mhm.
there making a case for those 89,000 open chairs?
Wow.
How do you do that? How do you think about that? What's the case you're going to make? Um, I don't know if that's a good answer because frankly, I forgot the question, but you see where I'm going,
It is a
right?
good
It it
answer.
it's work. Work is the thing. It's okay to say that work is a big part of your identity. I don't know why we're constantly told, "Oh no, 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 no. That's just the thing. That's just the thing you got to do so you can get to Disney World and fund your 401k." Right? So you're
Right.
counting the days so you can I mean, that's what I would say to a kid. Don't you dare make work the enemy because if you do that, you're going to be fighting an enemy 8 hours a day for the rest of your life. You don't want to do that.
And you lose purpose. You lose your why, the reason to get out of bed. And so if you choose to love it, I heard a mentor say once, the reason why people die quickly after retirement is number one, they lose money. I mean, it's expensive to get old. Number two, they lose love. So how many elderly people are abandoned, so to speak, in retirement communities? The family doesn't visit them. And or three, you lose purpose. You lose that reason of getting out of bed every single morning. And so, like if you say, if you choose to love it, you choose to enjoy it, you choose to find fulfillment in that, my gosh, you'll stay with that purpose.
Look, I would say too that part of the trick. I had a scoutmaster years ago who was a former colonel in the army and who ran our troop very much like a troop, like a platoon, you know. Um, and he told me, I thought that character and the scouts really did help me a lot in a lot of different ways, but I thought for the longest time that the big lesson was you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You you have to be willing to sleep in a bag outside of a tent in the rain. You have
Mm,
to be willing to endure. You have to be willing to be scared and insecure. You have to be willing to sing in front of a big group of people when you don't want to sing or recite a poem or shoot a deer or learn to whatever it is. You have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. And he said that's a good first step, but that's not the real trick. The real trick is to figure out how to love it.
mm,
Love your discomfort, welcome
mm,
it, embrace the suck, not forever, but in that moment. Why do you think cold plunges have become such a thing?
mm,
It's because they're painful, but restorative and short. You don't have to endure it for long. And most people can get their head around the fact, okay, short term pain, long term gain, that's worth doing. That's
right.
what diet is. That's what exercise is. That's what discipline is. Discipline is a drag because it's rooted in obedience, and we don't want to obey. We we don't want to wait. Delayed gratification, that's a big part of. I have a thing called a sweat pledge. Everybody who applies for a work ethic scholarship needs to sign it. One of the tenets in the pledge has to do with delayed gratification and patience and certainly gratitude in general. That's the very first thing that people read when they apply for a scholarship from microworks is this sweat pledge. And the top tenet simply says, I believe I have hit the greatest lottery of all time. I am alive. I
Mm,
walk the earth. I live in the United States. Above all things, I'm grateful. Now, that probably turns off 30% of the people who come looking for money.
which is what you're trying to
But
do. Mhm.
that's right. I mean, I wouldn't say that out loud to most people, but I know you know where I'm coming from. If if you can't agree with that, then the odds of me being able to help you just got wildly diminished. And I'm very stingy with the money people donate to my foundation. That $20 million I mentioned was, I take that seriously, and
You're a
I
good
I
steward.
hand it out with discretion.
Right.
But back to your question with work, it's like if you're fundamentally grateful, that's a choice. You're not born grateful. You're born miserable. You're born envious. Look at a 2-year-old kid playing with a toy and look at the other 2-year-old kid who wants the toy.
Mhm.
There's no permission. They just take it and then bash him over the head with it. You got to be taught a long list of things, and then it's up to you. You can choose to have a work ethic or not. You can choose to be grateful or not. You can choose discipline or not. And I got no judgments for anyone who goes another way, but with regard to my foundation, if we're not on the same page with respect to those things, then this particular pile of free money is probably not for you.
I'm sitting here taking notes as you're talking, and because just in those few short sentences, you threw out words that I love: ethic, gratitude, sweat, pledge, discipline, choice. I mean, those are all incredible, incredible things, belief systems to live by.
When did they become a punchline?
I have
You
no
know,
idea.
I but I the first time back to the Boy Scouts, I was only 11 or 12, but that former colonel in the army, he was serious. And when I raised my hand to give the scout oath, you know, it it meant something.
Yeah,
On my honor, I'll do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to right, and so forth. Um, Now, it's easy to make fun of those things. It's easy to make fun of the pledge of allegiance. It's easy to make fun of, Future Farmers of America and Skills USA and the 4-H Club. They all have pledges. They all have oaths. They all ask their members to take a stand and to make
yeah,
a promise
yeah,
and to develop a code, to have a thing. Uh, that's unpleasant,
yeah.
but it still matters.
Uh, by the way, my scoutmaster was the police chief, so we got that same really good good discipline. And as a result, I became like an Eagle Scout at 14. I was one of the youngest
You're
in my
kidding.
community. No, no, I
I
still
didn't
go
know
back
that
and stuff.
about you.
Yeah.
I got mine at the last possible. I was about to turn 17.
Oh, that's the
Uh,
cutoff, right?
and yeah, back then it was anyway. It's funny. I haven't thought about the scouts. I didn't think about them much once I started my career. It wasn't until Dirty Jobs blew up that I started hearing from people whose kids were getting their Eagle Award, and they asked me, to write a letter of
Oh,
congratulations. Um, I sent out just over 50,000
wow,
in 10 years,
wow,
and yeah,
that's
yeah,
huge.
it mattered. I
That
got one from
matter.
Gerald Ford.
Now I got to go back because I remember I think I got some as well. So I got to go back and do a little research on who sent me that letter. That's awesome. So I want to switch gears here a little bit,
Sure.
um, and I want to talk about your podcast. And you've in your podcast you've featured people on skilled trades, workforce, entrepreneurship, Hollywood. You've interviewed some actors, but you've also put a spotlight on the invisible work, so to speak: plumbers, welders, farmers, veterans, military, first responders, pop culture. You've you've also featured your producer Chuck, great guy by the way. I love meeting Chuck. He's Don't lose Chuck. He's amazing. Um, you also, and this is, I think I brought this up when I was with you too, that you've had a recurring guest on your podcast, and that was your mom, and that was, that stuck out to me. What are the topics that you enjoyed the most discussing with your mom?
Well, my mom and I, every month, I would just have her on. I just called it Coffee with Mom. I didn't think of it as an actual episode of the podcast, but it's two people talking for an hour, having a cup of coffee. And one day I said to Chuck, let's just put it up there. I think everybody has or had a mom. Everybody had a relationship. Everybody, you know, I I really treasure my relationship with my mom, and I wanted to share her, honestly. So we just started putting up these random catch ups, on a Sunday morning over a cup of coffee, and people loved them. I should tell you too, my mom, um, she'll be 88 next week,
Wow.
and you know, because we award work ethic scholarships, and because Dirty Jobs is such a work centric brand, I talk a lot about my grandfather and my
Mm,
dad and the many men like Les Swanson who I've met along the way, who really do embody the kind of work ethic that I try and elevate. But it was my mom all
Mm,
these years. My mom is a writer. Talk about passion. All she ever wanted to do was be a best-selling author. So all
mm,
she did was write every day.
mm.
Every day she would write an unauthorized biography of somebody she met. Could be a cop on a horse. She's crazy for horses. And I remember as a kid, just she walks up to a cop, starts asking him questions. She pulls out her yellow legal pad. She starts writing. Half hour later, she goes home. She's got a story. And later that night, it's stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet.
Wow, that's
You know,
great.
my dad would pull it down the next morning and read it to us kids. He'd take it to church. He'd read it there. He'd read it to people at the Bob's Big Boy, total strangers. If you're trapped in an elevator, he'd pull out, a
God, I
piece of
love this
paper and
story.
say, "Hey, have you heard the latest from Peggy Rowe?"
I
And he'd read you a story. So all I ever saw my mom do for 60 years was write every single day. That's what she did every single day. Discipline. She wrote and wrote and wrote.
Mm,
Never got published. Oh, local newspaper, magazine, public interest, here and there, little things, but never got a book deal until she was 80.
see,
And then her first book went to number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. 2 years later, she did it again. 2 years after that, she did it again. Last year, she just did it with this. She's in a retirement home now with my dad. She wrote, "Oh no, not the home." And these are true stories of the shenanigans that go on at the Oakcrest retirement community. They're hysterical.
I love that.
So, you know, I so when I talk about delayed gratification and when I talk about discipline and when I talk about passion and not following it but taking it with you, the truth is my mom gave up on her dream 20 years ago, but she never gave up on the work. She kept doing the
Ah,
work. And
oh,
eventually, the world spun and circumstances changed, and one of her sons became marginally famous. So I was able to take some of her work and and show it off. You know, I read a story she wrote about the time she lost her big blue purse at the Walmart and the hilarity that ensued when my dad, who's hard of hearing, is dumpster diving for the purse and she's calling her phone trying to find the right trash can. Crazy story. And made me laugh. And I read it and I posted it on Facebook. Just me sitting at the kitchen table reading a story that my mom had sent me just because it was her time to write and she wanted to write something funny. So I really read an email from my mother. And then I went out into the world to do whatever. And when I came home, I went on my Facebook page and 71 million people.
what?
You can Google this right now. In fact, you should. You'll love it. It's just me sitting at the kitchen table reading my mom's story about her big blue purse. 71 million people read this thing, right? So that's when a publisher reached out to me. This is a true story. You can't make it up. And says, "Hey, your mom's pretty funny. If she can give us a couple dozen stories like that, like an Irma Bombeck, Betty White kind of take, just make sure you're in them so we have some sort of hook, because, she's first time author." And I said, "Okay." So I tell her, I said, "Mom, I just got a call from Simon and Schuster. I think they'll publish a book. Can you write a couple dozen stories like that and put me in them?" My mom says, "Well, Michael, I have 2 other sons." And I'm like, "Mom, are they famous?" She's like, "Well, let me see what I can do."
That's
So
great.
my mother goes away, and she writes for like 2.5 months, and she comes back with this. Here, let me show you. I got a copy over here. It's called Stand By. It's called About My Mother. This is what my mom writes. It's dozens of stories about my grandmother. I'm not in any of them. So the publisher is like, "What is this? We can't sell this." So I print 10,000 copies of this book. They sell out in 2 days. Then the publisher calls and says, "Okay, you didn't tell us she could really write." I'm
Wow.
like, "Well, of course she can write." So that's how it happens. And then 2 years later, she writes about your father and other celebrities I've known. And then she writes vacuuming in the nude and other ways to get attention, which goes to number 1. So, you know, I again, it's very humbling, but I just keep learning everything. Every time I think I've got it figured out, I go get a haircut by some kid who reminds me that I've ignored a whole industry. And every time I go out to talk about work ethic and dirty jobbers and my amazing granddad who built the house I was born in without a blueprint, I forget about my own mother
Mm,
who who set the mark for work ethic and discipline and
mm.
passion and patience. So, I I'm very lucky to be surrounded by great examples that prove, I think, everything I'm trying to push up the hill.
Well, I love this conversation about your mom for so many reasons, and something that you brought up that I can't remember exactly how you worded it. That maybe the hope of getting published never came to fruition, but that didn't stop her from the discipline of still writing. And I like that because I'll have students or I'll have hairdressers that say, "Gosh, I would love to do hair and makeup for fashion shoots." I'm like, "Cool. How many of you have you done?" "Well, I haven't done any yet." "And why haven't you?" "Because nobody's paid me." So you're waiting for somebody to pay you. You're waiting for somebody else to give you permission to do what you love to do. I love that story
Yes.
about your mom.
Well, look, I hadn't thought of it till just now, but my mom couldn't get published for 60 years. I couldn't get dirty jobs on the air in a million years. I had to shoot the pilot myself. And then the deal that I made with the network was so bad. It was so onerous, but I had to do it to get the show on the air. And then I just had to say, well, if it's any good and people like it, I'll get another bite at the apple later. But you're y- you're right. You can't be passionate about a thing, even a thing you're good at, and expect to hit the ground with all the perks, the 401k, the built-in vacation, the starting salary that is an accurate reflection of your sense of who you are. I mean, back to the lecture thing. Nobody wants to hear this, but you know, it's a every now and then you just got to take a bite of the shit sandwich. I'm sorry, but it's just it call it dues paying, call it patience, call it whatever it is. If you can find a way to be okay being uncomfortable, you're on your way. If you
Right,
can find a way to love it and say, bring it, you're going to get there. I
right.
don't know exactly when, I don't know precisely how, but the world has a way of rewarding those traits. And, I would leave you with this too regarding my mom. She I asked her a very similar question because now she's kind of a celebrity, and in the writing world, people come to her all the time because she embodies what can happen if you're patient. And I said, "Mom, how do you? I mean, you don't want to be Beyonce. You don't want to be standing on stage telling somebody you've never met to stick with their passion and follow their dream. You don't know if they're any good. What if they can't write? How do you think about encouraging someone whose desire and whose natural ability don't coincide?" And she said, "Oh, Michael, that's a very annoying question, but let me think. Let me think." And then she said, "I think maybe I'd like to think of myself as one of those people in the crowd who shows up to watch a marathon. And I like to imagine myself near the 25-mile marker. where the runners are so tired. They've been running all day and they're exhausted. And I like to imagine myself standing there with a cool cup of water, holding it out to them, saying, "Here, here, you'll feel better if you drink this." That's all I can do. I don't know if they're going to win the race. I don't know if they have any business running marathons. I just want to be a source of encouragement to
Hmm.
people who were in the race. And I
Um,
thought, God damn,
damn,
my
she's
mom
good.
is smart.
She's good. And
Yeah.
just I lost my beautiful mother 2 years ago at 96 years old. So,
Mm.
and I know you already do this. Well, just take it in and breathe it in, and maybe
I'm a
if
mama's
your
boy.
mom,
I'm an unapologetic mama's boy.
good,
Always have
good,
been.
proud of that,
Yeah.
very proud of that. But
Yeah.
and maybe with your mom becoming a bit of a celebrity, maybe she can help you get some gigs. You never know.
You laugh. It's funny. I'm flying back early in March. She's quite a celebrity in the retirement community where she lives. It's a big company. They're called Ericsson, and they're having their big annual meeting. And the guy who organized it said, "Look, how would you feel about just sitting there with your mom and talking to her for an hour, just like you do on the podcast?"
Wow, wow,
And I said, "If it's good, if it's good with mom, it's good with me." So
that's the best. That's the best.
that's what I'm doing next month.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Very,
Oh, and
very,
by the way, there'll be no money.
there you go.
I'll make my money elsewhere.
So, I want to ask you about this series, Returning the Favor,
Hmm.
and it's basically, from what I understand, remarkable people making a difference in their communities. And I'm just curious, what have you learned and gained from that?
Well, a lot. First of all, that show is now called People You Should Know.
Oh,
Returning the Favor went for 100 episodes. It aired exclusively on Facebook for 4 years. Um, I won an Emmy. This is weird. Look at, I don't know. Is it here? Wait, can you see my Emmy? Okay, I had it in the background.
yeah,
I,
my Emmy's back here someplace. I can't really find it right now.
I, I only
Congratulations.
mention it. Look, it was it was so strange. I got it during the lockdown, and we had done 100 episodes, and basically all returning the favor did was it was an attempt to celebrate the neighbors you wish you had.
Mhm.
We would find people in communities doing something selfless and decent, um, and we would show up under the pretense of making a documentary about that topic. Could be foster care, could be could be skilled trades, could be anything. There was so many people out there doing nice things. Anyhow, I would send a crew in. We'd interview them. They thought they were a part of a documentary. Then I would show up, and that would surprise them. And then I'd get to know them. And then while I was distracting them, we would do something elaborate for them.
Wow.
Um, Most of these surprises, oh, I mean, 50,000, $100,000. We'd build warehouses. We would give them whatever they needed to allow them to do more of what they were already doing.
Wow.
And then they would cry and laugh, and the whole town would come out. There'd be a parade, and it was the ultimate. It, I would say it was the ultimate feel good show, but it really wasn't. It was like Dirty Jobs in the sense that it was the making of a feel good show. We
Mm,
made sure the viewer saw what it took to surprise somebody.
mm.
Anyway, we put this on Facebook back in 2017, I guess. And yeah, it got 450 million views. It was
Wow.
enormous. But it wasn't TV. It was just a social thing. And once Facebook determined that they didn't really want to be competing with YouTube or Netflix, their whole initiative, it was called Watch. The whole Watch platform went away, and
Mhm.
so did Returning the Favor. So my partner and I, Mary, we changed the name to People You Should Know, and we're still doing that show. I put it on YouTube now. Some of them air, I think, on the Angel platform, which is a streaming service. But mostly, if Dirty Jobs was a rumination on work, Returning the Favor and People You Should Know were just kind of a rumination on kindness
Mm,
and just basic, nonpartisan decency. You know, this all happened. I read a story about a kid who worked in an Ace Hardware store back in, I guess it was 2017 when this all started. And an old man came in, probably 85, 90 years old, and he asked for a shovel. And the kid said, "Yeah, we got shovels here. I'll walk you back." And he took him to the aisle where the shovels were. And the old man is looking at, big ones and small ones. He says, I guess this one will work. And he takes a shovel off the thing. And finally the kid says, "Can I ask what do you need the shovel for?" And the old man says, "It's a tough day. My dog died this
mm,
morning. It's my best friend. And I'm all alone now, and God, I miss him so much, but I've got to bury my dog."
mm,
And the kid says, "Here, come with me." And he walks him up front, gets him through the checkout, and says, "If you give me your address, I'll come by after work, and I'll dig the hole for you." And the old man says, "God, that would be a godsend." Gives him the address, and the kid stops by and buries the old man's dog.
mm,
Now, what do you do if you're me and you hear a story like that? I I really wasn't sure what to do, but I thought what would be nice is to show up and surprise that kid. Um, you know, and ultimately, I don't know, maybe get Ace Hardware to pay off his student debt, or help him with a mortgage, but find a way to tell that story and then celebrate it. That's what Returning the Favor was. That's kind of how it started. That was
mm,
just the idea. What do you do for the kid who mows the lawn of the shut-in and refuses to be paid? Who just does it? How to if you want to encourage more behavior like that, how do you do it?
mm,
How can you use TV or social media or basic storytelling?
mm.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of that was the impetus for the show, and that's why I still do it.
I love it. First of all, I love storytelling. I think that the best teachers, the best parents, the best mentors are storytellers. And sometimes the stories that we tell are our own stories, and sometimes they're the stories of other people. And when we can put a spotlight on those types of stories, it just brings hope. And what you focus on starts to grow. And so I love that that's what you have decided to focus on and put a spotlight on. That's
Four
amazing.
greatest words of all time, I think. Once upon a time,
It,
tough
it
to beat them.
reminds me of a story. I love telling the story. So, many, many, many years ago, again, I have this beauty school, and oftentimes the typical clientele that can go into a beauty school are shampoo set old ladies. Old ladies that come on a weekly basis, and they go in there to get their shampoo sets, and it's discounted. Maybe it's $2.50, or maybe $5. I don't know. So we had this one woman named Gladys who came in on a regular basis. Every week there's Gladys getting her hair done, getting her shampoo set. And one day she came in and she says, how much hair color could I get for $4? I'm like, Gladys, you want to color your hair? You've been coming here for years. Now why all of a sudden do you want your hair colored? She says, because it's my husband's funeral next week. And
Ugh.
like I'm like I'm doing right now. Of course, I break down and I'm like, oh my gosh, Gladys, you're not going to pay for this hair color. In fact, Gladys, you will never pay for any service ever again. In fact, no senior citizen will ever pay money in this school ever again. It's always going to be for free. One of those stupid decisions that you make based on pure
Mm,
emotion. Let me tell you something.
yeah.
My school became the hub. All of a sudden, they all went back to their retirement communities and said free services at Wynn's school. I mean, there was, I
No
mean,
good deed.
oh, I got cookies, I got quilts, I got marriage proposals from these old ladies. Was it a smart business decision? No. Was it one of the best things I ever did? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, it makes very little sense to try and separate a business decision from a life decision. We're constantly told we need to. We're constantly told, "Oh no, that's just business over there," as if that's
Right.
an excuse to be, a dick, right? I mean, "Oh, it's just business, so it's okay." Come on.
Right.
That's it's just sometimes I think we draw lines too brightly and too deliberately, you know, even with my own foundation. I was told early on, no, 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 your foundation lives over here, right? Your business lives over here. That's your mercenary position. This is your missionary position. You can never combine the two. Two positions, by the way, vastly underrated, in my opinion. But
Uh-huh.
what is life, really? I mean, like, why would you want to separate the good that you do from the money that you make? It's you know, there's some legal considerations, I suppose, but I've always, anything I've ever done to try and build my business, I've made sure the foundation is involved. And
Right.
whenever the foundation is involved in a thing, especially because my foundation is centered on work, then I'm I'm always open to opportunities to help elevate that job or that industry. Yeah, make no apology for it. I want to live in a world where that kid is rewarded, for burying a stranger's dog.
Yeah.
And you know what? I want to tell that story. I want to bring it to life. And then I want to put it on YouTube. And then you know what I want to do? I want to sponsor. I want a couple sponsors for that story because I need to eat too. And so that's how I want my life to work. I want to find a story that's worth telling. I want to find a sponsor who wants it told. And then I want to put it out there to an audience that appreciates it.
Hmm.
And as the backs of your shampoo bottles so aptly say, uh, rinse and repeat,
Hmm.
rinse and repeat. That's the
And
trick, man.
God, you've had me emotional
Yeah.
a lot through all of this.
Well, look,
So
man,
thank you
you
for that.
you as I said to the audience, and I hope your audience will check out our interview on the way I heard it because you were terrific. And as I told you, you are the exact you're the perfect subject of interest for someone like me because I can talk to famous people and I can talk to very, very wealthy people and I can talk to completely anonymous people. But the best people are the ones who I meet by accident, who are on a parallel path, who care deeply and feel deeply about the things that matter to them, whether it is a series of new careers that your schools will help launch in the coming year, or the memory of your beloved mom, or your own code, which you clearly possess and are eager to share. You know, you're an interesting cat, man, and stumbling across you the way I did is not scriptable. Neither is Dirty Jobs.
Hmm.
Neither is Deadliest Catch. My favorite shows can't be scripted. My favorite people would never agree to be scripted. So
Thank you,
you
Mike.
check that box. You're a great interview and a fine host, and
Thank you.
I'm happy to know you.
And by the way, it wasn't by accident. I stalked you. You remember that. I I made it happen.
Well, you know what? From my perspective, you're just another comet burning through the solar system.
Well,
But
thank
that's a no. I actually really do mean that as a compliment. I mean, not not to belabor the metaphor, but a solar system is what is it? There's a sun, there's some planets, and they're all in their orbits. They all do their things, but then every now and then these other objects enter and leave. Comets and asteroids and all sorts of things, come burning through your little world and hopefully make it make it more interesting than it was.
Thanks, Mike. Man, this turned out to be exactly what I knew it would be and more. So I'm just so
Yeah.
grateful for the time.
Anytime. I appreciate it a lot.
You're a good man. Thanks,
Likewise.
Mike.